Good evening, everyone. We ended last class talking about the Baroque period, 1600 to 1750. And tonight, we'll begin the classical period, or the Age of Enlightenment. And we'll soon find out what has enlightened us. The classical period runs from 1750, which is Bach's death, to around 1820, which is 7 years before Beethoven's death. So we have a shorter period of time. Our eras are getting shorter and shorter, and this is no exception. In the Baroque era, we found that the scientific methods and discoveries of geniuses like Galileo and Newton profoundly changed people's view of the world. And we are going to take this discovery of the mathematical laws of the universe, Newton's discoveries, we're going to take this into the classical period with these ideas firmly planted in our minds. The Age of Enlightenment, or the Age of Reason. What has enlightened us? Reason is good. Reason will solve problems. Reason will make your life completely fulfilled. Reason. If Newton could use human reason to solve all these interesting things that he was doing, to give us these wonderful discoveries, what people did is they said to themselves, if you could use reason to explain the natural world, why couldn't you use reason to explain what was going on around us? And where are we going? We're going towards revolution, specifically the French Revolution. Man is born free, and everywhere is in chains. It occurred to people that the same methods to determine Newton's laws could also be used to explain man and society. Reason versus the church. All of the privileges of the clergy. Reason. I have 4 children. I'm working 60 hours a week. And I'm looking at King Louis's palace of 128 rooms. And I'm getting a little sick of it. Right? Man is born free, but everywhere is in change. Reason versus the church. Reason versus oppression and tyranny, right? I'm sick of being oppressed, and I'm going to do something about it. And thanks to the example of 1776, political freedom, religious toleration, and the goals of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness could coexist. We prove that. They will take that model. Right? Napoleon comes along, people believed in him. But then, of course, as you know, turned out to be a crazy megalomaniac. Right? And so the French Revolution will be upon us, certainly around Mozart's death in 1791. And as we will see, with every period of time, the arts will reflect the emotional and intellectual trends and continue to give voice to the eternal hopes and fears of humanity. And so we have revolution not only around everyone, right? It was the power of reason, not custom or tradition, that was the best guide for human conduct. The best guide for human conduct. Philosophers like Voltaire, who lived from 1694 to 1778, he was jailed because of his beliefs. He spoke out. You know, people don't take it anymore. This belief, this age of reason, these ideas attacked the privileges of the aristocracy. So again, I ask you to imagine, you know, the beautiful palace of Versailles. A huge, grand spectacle, right? And your tiny little hut with your 4 kids. And you pay taxes, right? We are on the brink of revolution. We will see that as this is happening, the middle class is going to come up very, very, very strong. And that's very important because it's going to be the middle class that starts to support music. Not only the church, not only the state, but also the middle class. We will see the rise of public concerts and opera now, opera houses bursting up all over Europe. And this will become very, very important. In music history, the transition between the Baroque style and the full flowering of the classical style, we have what's called a pre-classical period. And the pre-classical style runs from about 1730 to 1770. And you'll see this style, this pre-classical style, what's happening? Well, what we're going to do is we're going to concentrate in the classical period on simplicity and clarity. Simplicity and clarity. Well, what happened in the Baroque? We had the very complex style of, let's say, the fugue, right? Very complex polyphony and counterpoint, and we're taking all of this, and you know, people were generally confused by it. And so what composers in the pre-classical period do is they take out anything you don't need to hear, I guess, and what we'll see is clear melody with a very simple, simple accompaniment. Tuneful melody, simple harmony. And this pre-classical style, of course, is going to affect composers that we will study: Haydn, Mozart, and Beethoven. The classical paintings of the day, we see a lot of balance, order, and proportion. And those are three words that I want you to remember with music, too. Balance, order, and proportion. Okay? And when we talk about the music of these composers, keep that in mind, because we're going to see the forms of the classical style and how very orderly it is. And that's one of the reasons why we usually sit and smile when we listen to classical music. I don't know many people who hate Mozart. I don't know many people who say, gosh, that's ugly, or that's just, I hate it. Not many people do. And it's because it's meeting you at your seat. You don't have to do anything with this music. It's coming right at you. It's not like the fugue where you have to figure out every entrance. This music is simple. We hear lovely melody, simple harmony, emotion, right? Everything we like. And one of the reasons why it hits us as such friendly music is because it is so orderly. So one of our goals is going to be to figure out this order. Why is it that we like this music? Why does it have this universal appeal? Right? And we'll find out why. We'll look into the composers' lives, talk about the patronage system. Who are they writing for? What was this music for? Very often was for a purpose, for a gathering outside, as opposed to an opera or something like that. So we'll see the differences, and it is very, very interesting. It's a big adjustment from the Baroque period. The composers we will study, I just want to kind of organize the period first. The composers we will study: Franz Joseph Haydn, 1732 to 1809, often referred to as Papa Haydn, and we'll figure out why. He was one of the fathers of the symphony and the string quartet. And of course, Mozart. Mozart, 1756, died at a very young age, 1791. And last but not least, our composer who will begin his life in the classical style, his music in the classical style, and then we will see the transition that Beethoven makes into the style of the Romantic period. And he's a really wonderful composer to see this transition happen. And what happens during his life? Well, the French Revolution. And so we'll see when that starts to happen, how his music changes, and also his unfortunate disability as well. And so that will enter into the mix. But that's who we will study during this period: Haydn, Mozart, and Beethoven. Okay, now the genres we will study, the types or forms of music that we are going to study. First of all, on the instrumental side, we're going to talk about orchestral music, music specifically for an orchestra, and chamber music. This is a period of time when people would go over to other people's homes in the salons and play chamber music, play string quartets, play piano trios, play chamber music, music for a small ensemble, music to be played in a very intimate atmosphere. And this was something that was just a wonderful thing, that composers could get together and read their own chamber music. Mozart and Haydn actually read chamber music together. Very interesting. So this is very important. Okay? So orchestral and chamber music. On the orchestral side, we'll be studying the symphony. Finally, we have the symphony and the concerto. On the chamber music side, the string quartet. When you think of quartet, how many do you think of? 4, right? 2 violins, viola, and cello. It's another wonderful way for a composer to do wonderful things. It's just like a choir. It's just like having a choir of string players in front of you. And certainly Mozart, Haydn, and Beethoven all did incredible things for the development of the string quartet. When I sit down and read a string quartet by any of these composers, it is always a great thing. They all did it well. We'll also very briefly talk about the sonata, the piano sonata, the solo piano sonata, because this instrument right here is coming into play big time. The harpsichord is going to go by the wayside, and we will have the development of the modern piano, capable of dynamics, capable of interesting color changes. So that's a big development as well. So it's actually a little easier in this period as far as genre than the Baroque. Remember, the Baroque, diverse styles of composition, you had a lot of different stuff. In this period of time, it is a little bit easier. Now, the characteristics of classical music. Characteristics of classical music. First of all, those 3 words, I want you to keep them in your head, keep them going. Remember BOP, B-O-P, BOP. Balance, order, and proportion. Okay? And we're going to learn about what balance, order, and proportion, how it's used in Mozart, Haydn, and Beethoven. First of all, contrasts of mood. We talked about the Baroque period and how we have a unity of mood in compositions, and now what we're going to see is contrast of mood. A late Baroque piece by Bach could convey one single emotion. A classical composition, however, is going to fluctuate in mood. Dramatic and turbulent at one point, but at the next might be a carefree dance tune. You just never know. There's always going to be that contrast available. And so what happens is these conflicting surges of elation and depression and crying and laughing, you as a human being are going to enjoy it because it's appealing to your senses, appealing to your emotion. And what masters like Haydn, Mozart, and Beethoven did was they were able to give unity and logic to this emotion. Flexibility of rhythm. We will now hear a wealth of rhythmic patterns. A lot of different rhythmic patterns. And of course, when you have different rhythmic patterns, you're going to add a lot of variety to music. And it's going to be even more interesting. We'll still have that wonderful driving sound that we had in the Baroque period. That's for sure. But also we'll have different rhythms, okay? Unexpected pauses. Syncopation, remember that word from the first class? An unexpected accent. And frequent changes in short notes and long notes on beats where you don't expect it. So it's going to be very, very interesting. And things will really change a lot. Melody. Melody in the classical period. The classical period contains some of the most memorable melodies, some of the most memorizable melodies that you have. And we're going to check out some of them. But they're among the most tuneful and easy to remember. Quite often you're running out of a classical music concert singing what you just heard, right? And one of the reasons why, and this is getting very picky, but if you take a melody from the classical period, it is often very symmetrical, usually 8 bars, 4 bars up, 4 bars down. And so that's why that's why we can remember it, because it is structured. And so even the little 8-bar melodies have balance, order, and proportion. Okay? Dynamics, okay? That is certainly developing more and more. We will see by the time we get to Beethoven, It's not just piano and forte anymore, ladies and gentlemen. What we have are dynamics that contain maybe some violence, like an accent or something like that. Beethoven does crescendo to piano. So you get as loud as you can, then all of a sudden it's piano, which creates a lot of drama. And so you'll see how, with the entrance of different dynamics and how composers are experimenting, that things get really crazy by the time we get to Beethoven. We also see, as I just said, the entrance of the piano, and the piano is going to be the most important accompanimental instrument of the classical period, of course. The classical orchestra, as you know, at the end of the Baroque, Bach was busy adding woodwinds and brass and things like that. Now they're going to be staples. We're going to have a woodwind section. We're going to have a brass section. We're going to have a percussion section. You know, in the early Haydn symphonies, probably not too many winds, and as you'll see as we get to the later Haydn symphonies, you're going to have basically a little bit of everything. And so now the orchestra is very different. By the time we get to Beethoven, we're going to add trombones. By the time we get to Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, 1824, we're going to see not a huge orchestra of tremendous proportions. And then he's going to say, let's add chorus and soloists as well to the symphony. And so things are going to expand incredibly, certainly by the time we get to Beethoven. So those are some of the characteristics we will see. Now, I would like to start first by talking about this balance, order, and proportion. Okay? And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about this development that's kind of been brewing in the Baroque period. And that is the genre of the symphony. A standard classical symphony has 4 movements. Okay? The tempo of these movements are fast, slow, dance, and fast. In its earlier days, the symphony was 3 movements and ended with that dance. But you know what? It didn't impress the audience, you know. Classical composers were out to impress you, or they were going to impress whoever they were working for, their guests, or something. And so that dance movement wasn't enough. And so what we put in was a real fast, woohoo, fiddle tune or something at the end, so people would get up and shout. And quite often, that still happens. So we have the real fast gangbusters in the last movement. And so standard classical symphony, 4 movements. Okay? Now, to give you just a taste of this idea of balance, order, and proportion, I'm going to talk to you about the inner workings of a standard classical symphony, because you guys aren't going to believe that Mozart, Haydn, and for the most part Beethoven is going to use a formula for the first movements of their symphonies and their string quartets and their sonatas and their concertos. But right now we're just looking at the symphony. And this formula is called sonata form. Okay? That's the form. It doesn't have anything to do with the genre of the sonata, so don't get all confused. Okay? The term sonata form refers to the form of a single movement. So don't get it confused with the term sonata, which is used for a whole composition made up of several movements. Okay? So, what's so interesting here is that sonata form is made up of 3 sections, okay? And you need to know this. The first section is called an exposition. The second section is called the development. The third section is called the recapitulation, and that's a real big word, so all you guys have to remember is recap, you know, and you'll get it. The exposition is where the themes are introduced, and they're usually done pretty quickly, right away. Themes introduced. If you're Haydn, he didn't like to play with that second theme a lot, so it can be one theme from Mr. Haydn quite often. But for Mozart, the lyricist, the dramatist, the guy who is really into that Italian opera emotion, you're going to get 2 themes, and they're usually contrasting. So in the exposition, if the composer chooses 2 themes, they will be announced in the exposition. Okay? Then we have the development section. The development section is the most dramatic section of the movement. The listener may be kept off balance as the music moves very, very restlessly through different keys. This is where the composer can basically do anything he or she wants. And we have harmonic tension, a lot of tension, an argument of some kind. The music will move back around, and then we will have the recapitulation or recap. Think about it in the English language, right? It is English. What am I saying? If you recap the day's events, you're recapping what happened during the day. And so what you have is the themes return. It's very simple. If you quote 2 themes in the exposition, you're going to have 2 themes in the recapitulation. And then we'll use a closeout section. Don't have to write this down. It's called a coda. It's just a little closeout. And so without further ado, I think the easiest thing to do is to listen to it. Please follow your listening guides, because it'll tell you when the exposition ends and the development begins. Okay? This is Mozart's Symphony No. 40 in G minor, first movement, sonata form, 3 sections. Was Mozart's Symphony No. 40 in G minor, written in 1788, and we listened to that to listen to form, this idea of balance, order, and proportion, and this is a very, very good example. And also, the amount of intensity that we're hearing already from Mozart is just amazing. That's an amazing symphony. Go run to the CD store and buy it.